Welcome back to TELOS. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Dr. Robert Koppers, a man who spent decades studying near-death experiences. He studied thousands of people, and his perspective on near-death experiences really matters because he hasn't actually had one himself. However, all his research, all the testimonies and quotes that he has studied create an unbiased opinion on the one question which we've been asking since the dawn of time. What happens when we die? We go into depth about the transition between life and death and what people have experienced in those moments. He has a book, Impressions on Near-Death Experiences, which recalls and cites 100 quotations on people who have experienced near-death experiences, NDEs, themselves. Bob also talks about something called the life review, which is interesting because there's a very well-known phrase that we all know, which is "my life flashed before my eyes." This supposedly actually happens. When we die, our life review commences. Our life does flash before our eyes, and we see key moments in our lives and revisit them. Bob also talks about another very interesting thing, which is that people, not only have they had to relive moments where they've impacted other people from their own perspective, but they relive the moments they've impacted people from the perspectives of the other people. Which brings up a question. If you knew that you would one day have to experience firsthand the impact that you have on other people, how would that make you live? Anyway, let's not hesitate to start this podcast. I'm buzzing to get it out there and show you guys what Bob has to say. So let's get into it. Most people have heard the phrase, "my life flashed before my eyes," but your research suggests that that could actually be the case. What does that phrase mean to you?
Well, it means to me that it's part of the near-death experience. Near-death experience is an experience that is extraordinary for people who have had it. And it's the essential part of a near-death experience is that they not only leave their body, but that they also feel that they have been on the other side of life. So some people say they have been in heaven or at the doorstep of heaven, or they were on the other side, just briefly or sometimes lengthy. But a near-death experience, part of it, some people have a life review. So if you say, life flashed before my eyes, that is something that some NDEs do have. But it's not a flash. It can take quite a while for them to process everything in their life. And a life review can come in different ways. It can be like a film. Some people describe it as a lot of photos or a lot of images of their life. Some people just say, I could just access any part of my life. It was as if I was looking at many, many thousands of television screens. And if I focused on one of them, I could just look at that point in my life and feel what it was for me to be alive at that moment. So the flashing before your eyes can take a long time, and it's an essential part of a near-death experience.
So you've researched into over 100, I assume hundreds of people who have had near-death experiences. What's the most common thing that you think they all end up saying happened?
Well, I studied thousands of them, but in my book, maybe I can just flash it for you. Impressions of near-death experiences. I have 100 people telling about their near-death experience. So I have quotes of them. The book is full with quotes. I say little, they say most part of it. And I took these hundreds these 100 people, more than 100 people, because I wanted to be able to refer to where they have published things about their near-death experience, either in a book or on a on internet, or in an archive like the one from IONS, or from NDERF. Those are repositories where people can put their near-death experience, and so that is public. I wanted to use public stories, but I have seen many, many more. And the essential things that come that occur regularly, or that occur most of the time, actually, this one occurs almost all the time. That's the feeling of unconditional love that people experience when they have their near-death experience. And this is an overwhelming thing for them. Apart from some other aspects, like we just mentioned, life review is very overwhelming as well. But the feeling of unconditional love that is there for everyone, or especially for the near-death experiencer, that is something that really, really touches them. And it makes them not want to go back anymore to their body, because they feel that on the other side there is such a nice environment, such a friendly, loving environment. And if they have to go back again, they come back to our world, and they say that world is not really loving. It's so difficult. It's so confined. There's so many limitations, and they don't like it. What they see on the other side, they want to stay there. So it's a struggle sometimes for people to understand that they have to go back.
Is the love this unconditional love that you refer to? Is it a different kind of love to the type that people experience in relationships? You know,
Yes.
friendships, family. Is it different?
Yes, absolutely. Because the word unconditional is really what it means. There are no conditions there. In a relationship with friends, or with your partner, or also with children, it is, to a certain extent, it is conditional. But this love is really unconditional. And some people have even said the term unconditional love has no meaning. It is much, much more than that. It goes even further than that. And some people go to very great lengths to explain how you have to see the love that you have on the other side. And it's what I understand. I didn't have a near-death experience myself, but what I understand is that that love is really, really something that sticks out from anything they have had on Earth.
Mm. In the near death experience, do you think this unconditional love is like a big warm hug that feels unnatural?
It feels unnatural. What do you mean?
Like we're not used to anything like it?
Yeah, that's how I understand it. It's not something that you can find on Earth.
Mm.
It's not something you can have here. And by the way, everything these people experience during their near-death experience are things they cannot find on Earth. People talk about colors, or music, or environments that they see on the other side. And they say, I've been searching all my life and I cannot find the colors, or the music, or the environment. It doesn't exist here. It's a totally different environment. Just to mention a few other things that are different from our environment here, is that seems not to be time. Time seems to be absent there. Or as one person said, time is there all at the same time. So you can see through time, you can see history, you can see the future. For us, for me, that's mind-boggling because how can you see the past, but moreover, how can you see the future? But that is what they say. They can access time. They say time is like some person tried to explain it as a layered cake where you can cut through the cake and you see all the layers of time at the same time. Or you can see it as a loaf of bread where every part of time is there and you can just slice it somewhere and you can see that part of the time. It's they don't know how to explain that.
Mm.
And another thing is that place is no confinement either. There are stories where NDEs say they can go to any place they want to. There's a story in my book about an Iranian person who had a car accident and was taken to a hospital. And in the hospital, he felt he was having his near-death experience, and he could understand or hear what the nurse was thinking. That's special in itself, but that's been reported many times by others. But he also said, I could think of my mother, and then at that moment when I was thinking of her, I was in her house, and I could see that she was preparing dinner. And then he thought of a friend, and then he was at the house of the friend. And these people lived hundreds of kilometers away from where the accident was or where the hospital was. So he could be there at the friend's house in spirit or in a conscious way. And they couldn't see him, of course. And the mother at the house of the mother, and at the same time in the hospital. So time and place are things that do not affect the other side. It is more than that.
Mm.
And there are so many things that are strange on the other side, but time and place are more often mentioned.
We've experienced that, like humans have experienced the warping of like time and space in dreams, hallucinations, maybe altered states of consciousness on drugs or whatever. What differentiates an NDE and a near death experience from things like dreams and lucid dreams, etc.?
They are totally different. Near-death experiences, if you ask people about their near-death experience many, many years ago, they know exactly what they have experienced. It is still there for them. It's engraved in their memory. If you ask me about or anyone about a dream, most of the time, you know it maybe the first moments after you wake up, but then it evaporates. So it is totally different. And hallucinations, these are no hallucinations because hallucinations are chaotic stories where there's no storyline. But near-death experiences have a storyline. There's a meaningful communication, and sometimes so meaningful that people are astounded by it, by the factual things that are being given to the near-death experiencer that can later be confirmed independently.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, like it is different from a dream. It's different from hallucinations. If you talk about DMT or other substances, I'm not sure that these experiences that people have with drugs are the same. I tend to think they are not, but a near-death experience is not defined by the cause, but it's defined by what is in the near-death experience. To make it clear, there's research done by Bruce Grayson. That's a very big name in this area. And he made a Grayson scale of, I think, 16 points. And it's a tick box exercise. So you can do the exercise, you can tick what you've seen. Have you been outside of your body? Have you met deceased relatives? Have you seen a live review, etc., etc.? So you can go through all these points, and if you tick enough points, then that defines a near-death experience. So it's not defined by someone being near death, so to speak, or someone having had drug-induced experience. It doesn't matter. Actually, at this moment, it's, I think, important to mention that near-death experiences occur most of the time in a medical critical situation, like a cardiac arrest or an accident. But there are many NDEs reported during a psychological downturn. So people who are really, really having a very, very difficult psychological period. Sometimes also when people have been praying very firmly or meditating very deep, there are accounts of near-death experiences in those cases. And occasionally, and those are really funny or extraordinary, I should say, and remarkable, is that some people have a near-death experience as a consequence of just a coincidence, nothing, spontaneously. I know of a few, and but you can tell that they have had a real near-death experience. And also drugs sometimes induce near-death experiences, but and without people being really dead. So
Mm.
it's not necessary to be close to death in order to have such an experience. It is so it's experience itself that defines what it is. And those are not hallucinations.
What do you think these, because like being in a deep state of meditation or, you know, a pretty strong prayer routine or, you know, whether you've just suffered a cardiac arrest, all these things are quite different, but they access the same thing, which is referred to as this near death experience.
Yes.
What what do you think it is that they're accessing if they're all quite different things?
Good question. Yeah. What I think it is apparently we are able to separate our consciousness from our body. That is what a near-death experience shows. And there are very well documented cases where this is demonstrated. It gives some kind of circumstantial evidence that near-death experiences are real. We call them veridical observations, so observations that have been verified independently by someone else. And these show us that there are two kinds of veridical observations. Maybe I should dive into this a little bit, if you allow me
Of
to.
course, yeah.
So in my book, I try to explain that there are two, well, it's the new version of my book. It's not yet in the old one. That there are two versions of near-death, veridical observations in near-death experiences. The first one is where someone exits the body, is able to roam around the operating dome or the car crash or wherever they have their near-death experience. They see something particular, and later they can, when they come back again and everything is good again, they can tell what they have seen, and it's being confirmed independently by someone else. This shows us that the consciousness apparently can be separate from the body. Let me give you an example there. An example of a woman that had been brought into the hospital and unconscious. She is there and has her near-death experience. Most of the time, people hover out of their body, go just below the ceiling, have the possibility to look down. But in her case, and that happens to many others, they go through the roof or through the walls and then they go somewhere else. Sometimes the near-death experience turns into this otherworldly environment, the heavenly kind of environment. But in her case, she was able to go through the ceiling and access another room that she didn't know existed. And in that room, she noticed there were a lot of beds with dolls in them, and all kinds of um, tools and medical equipment next to the beds. And then her near-death experience starts. And then later she comes back again and she tells this story. And people were astounded because above where she had been taken into the hospital, there is an how do you call that again? A room where they have courses for nurses to practice on dolls in a hospital kind of setting. And she had seen that. She couldn't have seen it from where she was with her body. So this shows you that her consciousness with her perception was separate from her body. There are many, many, many of these kind of stories. Um, the other form of vertical observations is the second kind, I would say, is when a near-death experiencer goes into this otherworldly environment and has meaningful conversation there, which they bring back to their well, if they come back to their body, they can tell about that, and it's being confirmed. And let me give you an example there. I have an example from my own experience, but that's a little bit lengthy. But this one is more brief. A woman was there was a woman in the United States. She was taken into hospital. She had her near-death experience. She goes to the otherworldly environment. She sees deceased relatives, many of whom she knew, but there was one person presenting himself as her brother, but he did that as a baby boy. So he presented himself as a baby boy and said to her, "I'm your brother." And she says, "I don't have a brother." And then he says, "Well, you had. Just remember how I look like, the clothes that I'm wearing, and tell your father." And when everything is good again, she goes back to her body and she's recovered. She asks her father, and the father acknowledges this because he said, "We had a child before you were born, but it died very quick. It was a boy, and we didn't want to talk about it to you or to anyone because it was too painful for us." So this is something that she didn't know. She couldn't have known it, and yet she came with that information from the other side. So for me, and there's also in this case, there are many of these kind of stories. For me, this is a sort of circumstantial evidence that we cannot only be separate with our consciousness from our body, but that we can also, that this otherworldly environment seems to be there. And just to flash one of the other publications, my book was a publication from the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And this one that I'm going to show you now is, it has so many of these examples, these vertical observations, and it's called The
Sorry, Bob,
Self
can you
Does
lift
Not
it up
Die.
a little bit more so I can see the bottom? Yeah, perfect.
Yes, yeah. So it's written by two Dutch people. I'm Dutch with the other book, and it's all published by the International Association for Near-Death Studies. It's a international association, and there is also a local group in the United Kingdom.
Wow. So when I hear this, it's mind-boggling. I think there's a select few questions which we've been asking since we've existed. Really, things like, is there a God? Why are we here? Chicken or the egg? All of these questions. But one of the key ones is what happens when we die. This research and this stuff that's being found, this evidence and stories from people who have experienced these near-death experiences it's revolutionary. It really is. But when
But it
when
has been around for like 1975
mm,
with the start of, it started by Raymond Moody, a doctor in the United States who wrote about it and coined the term near-death experiences.
but you read his book, didn't you? And that's what
Yes,
got you
yeah.
in. Tell
Yeah.
tell me a bit about his book and the effect that had on you.
Well, that's interesting. I was doing my studies in 75 and I came across his book. I was always spiritually interested. You must know that I was raised Roman Catholic with hell and purgatory. And those were the things that I didn't like. I didn't only like them, not. I also had the feeling that this was wrong. But it was because why would the problem for me was that suppose you live in a situation with a lot of difficulties. You're born in a family that is abusive or a family that knows nothing else than just shooting others or uh, doing corruption, making money off from others in a mean way, and things like that. I don't know. You can imagine people like that. If you're born in such a situation, in such an environment, how will your life play out? I was born in a total different situation with affluent parents. I was born in Venezuela, raised in Iran because my father was with Shell. And my life was sort of easy. Why would someone having a difficult life be sent to hell because well, they stole or maybe they killed? Why? I couldn't understand that. And then when I read Raymond Moody's book, and so that was the reason why I didn't like the hell and purgatory part. Yeah, because with Christianity, it's only you have one try. You get your life, you have one try. If you mess it up, you'll go to heaven, or you go to hell, or to purgatory. And if you do it right, you go to heaven. And in Raymond Moody's book, there is a woman talking about her near-death experience, and in it, she had her life review, and she saw what she did to others, and it was not always nice, but it was an average life, and that she understood there that there was no judgment. There is no judgment. And that is something that I hear so very often from near death experiences later on. But for me, that moment when I read it for the first time, I was like, wow, this is how it really is. Why would there be a necessity for a judgment by God or by Jesus or by Krishna or you mention it, Allah? Why? That's not necessary. We can do it ourselves. If we see what we did in our life and we understand that some things are not so very nice and other things are nice, then we can judge ourselves. And that is actually what happens. That's also what people say. There is no one judging you. And if there is someone judging you, it's yourself. There's a wonderful story in my book also about a Boy Scout who was having his life review in the presence of a light being, or he said it was an angel. And then when it was over, the boy said, "Wow, that was something." And um, what happens now? And then the angel says, "You will be judged by the most powerful judge there is." And then the boy goes a little bit eerie, and he says, "When will that happen?" And then the angel says to him, "That has already happened. You are the judge. So you are the most powerful
Wow,
judge there is."
wow.
And many people say that. So it's not just a few people that say there is no judgment. It is said consistently over many NDEs. So something must be true there.
So I wanna go deeper into getting more clarity around the idea of what near death experience actually is,
Yeah.
because it is one of them questions like what happens when we die and we've never been able to answer it, and then now we have this evidence and this research. It may make people a little bit standoffish. Um, People may think, "Whoa, like how can that happen?" You know, that
Mm.
what science is there, is what other evidence is there, etc. And from my understanding of, you know, having heard you speak and having researched into your work, it's what happens is either you're dying, or you're in a deep state of meditation or prayer, or randomly just driving along in the country roads or whatever, and you're in this place where you're either having a life review, or you've escaped your body, escaped the confines of your physical body, and you
Mhm.
are transcending physical reality to experience life in a different way. And there's also another thing there which you mentioned about experiencing the impact on others from their
Mm.
perspective. Tell me about that.
Yes.
I just need a quick 30 seconds of your time. I started Telos because I love having conversations with people. Not surface level stuff, but the deeper stuff. I'm 20 years old and I'm very much on this journey of figuring things out in life. And I'd love for you guys to come along with me for this journey and find out stuff with me too. Just need one favor. If you've been enjoying the clips and the podcasts you've been seeing so far, make sure you drop down below the video, hit like and subscribe. I can't stress enough how much that helps me. It makes me grow this podcast bigger so I can get bigger guests and improve the quality of these podcasts for you guys to listen to. And if you want to be up to date with every single podcast that drops, make sure you hit the notification bell so you can be the first to watch. Anyway, once you've done these tasks, let's get back to the podcast. Cheers.
Well, first of all, let me tell you that near-death experiences occur quite a lot of times, and a lot of times is like, there is a study where it says that it's like 5% of it was an American study, so 5% of the population has had such an experience. But you ask about the life review, and especially what sticks out from a life review is that you don't only see your life as if you're looking at a film or pictures, and you can see what you did to others. There's an other perspective that is mentioned many times over and over, and that is also something that is overwhelming for people to experience, because what happens is that you feel what you did to others, not only from your own point of view, but also from the point of view of the others. You become the others. You feel what you did to the others. So if it's nice things, you will be finding it wonderful to experience that. If it's not so nice things, you will feel the pain you inflicted on others. And this is said by so many people. And for me, together with a lot of other things that NDEs say, brings me to the conclusion that there is only one. There is a source that we come out of, and we live our lives, and we are separate from each other. But when we die, we go back to this source, it seems, because that is being told by many people. We all are of the same material. We are all the same. We're all one, or we are all God. That's, I just say some of the quotes that I heard, and those are there. We are God. People say that we are one.
The experiencing experiencing the impact you had on other people from their perspective, do you think that that could be, let's say, I don't know, I'll make someone up. Let's say a person called Jeff was a bad person, right? And Jeff treated people badly, and he stole from people, and he was rude to people, and he hurt people, and he wasn't very good to people. And then when he died, in his or as he was dying, in his near death experience, he had to experience all of the bad stuff he did to people from their perspective. Could we say that that is potentially a version of living in hell?
Um, well, um, I think if we do real bad things to others, we will encounter that in our life review. And if we encounter it in our life review, we go, if you want to put it like that, we go through our own created hell. Apparently, we created a hell for someone else, and we will have to step through that ourselves. We will experience it ourselves. So, in a sense, yes, yeah, but it's something that's temporary because a life review ends at a certain point of time. Well, the time is not there on the other side, but you will experience what you did to others, and if it's a hell you created for others, you will experience hell. Yeah, you can say it like that.
Because
Yeah.
what you said is as well is these people who have experienced this haven't like it's felt any judgment or any like sort of punishment or anything like that, which a lot of traditions and religions
Yes.
like to say. I
Yeah, but
suppose.
that's important to understand. So that you go through the hell you created for someone else, but there is no judgment and there
Mm.
is no punishment.
So it's
If you want to
self-inflicted.
see that as a punishment, then that's a punishment. But that's all.
Mm.
There's nothing else. You're not being sent to hell or to a purgatory for eternity. But that's not the case. That's what I understand.
Another thing you said as well, though, I want to go into a little bit, is you said about the interconnectedness of things. Again, it's another thing that we've heard for millennia from a lot of ancient traditions, shamanic traditions,
Yeah.
religions. They talk about beings being interconnected. We are all one. We are all part of one thing. What does that mean? You know, I see someone across the room from me, and they look like a different person. They
Yeah.
look like they're separate from me. We're not joined by the same body. What does interconnectedness mean?
That's a very good and valid question. What I understand what people say with an NDE is that they really feel connected to everyone, also to the people that they dislike. I mean, everyone has people they dislike. Just we go maybe to the politics area and you will find people you don't like. You are connected to them as well. We are connected to nature. That's an important thing as well. So we are connected to everything. And what does it mean? That's one of the things that I find very fascinating from near-death experiences. It means for me that I have to understand that I cannot just do things to others and walk away and think that's it.
Mm.
um, I will feel it myself. So it makes people who understand this, so those are the near-death experiencers, but also the people that really are interested in near-death experiences and understand it, make these people think maybe twice before they do something very nasty to someone else. But having said that, people with a near-death experience still remain human beings with their own flaws. They don't suddenly turn into saints. They do change. They do change. That's one of the things that has been established scientifically, but they still remain people. But having this idea that we are all in this together and that you have to be trying to be nice and good to others, and suppose that more people will understand that that's the case and that they will understand that veridical observations give real circumstantial evidence that near-death experiences are real, then maybe many people will change their behavior and we won't have these wars. Because all the wars that are currently going on, you can think of them yourself, every single one. All the soldiers, they are doing harmful things to the other side, will feel what they did to the others as if they are those others. They will feel it firsthand. Anything
Mm.
also, the other things that people can do to each other on a smaller scale. It doesn't need to be a war, but if people really know that, you will feel it yourself. You will send your soldiers into feeling the hell they create for others. Then maybe people will stop doing that, stop bombing other countries, stop chasing people off their land, stealing their land, or whatever. maybe I believe firmly that a better world is possible when people really would understand this, when enough people would really understand this and live to it.
There's an example from your book. You might have to remind me of the name, but I think it's Daniel Brinkley.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Um, yeah, can you tell me about his near death experience?
Yeah, he wrote a book by about his near-death experience, and it's interesting book. He wrote it together with Paul Perry, and his near-death experience was as a consequence of a lightning strike that went through the landline of a telephone, and he was knocked out. Um, and he had his life review as part of a near-death experience. Not everyone, not every NDE is the same as another. They are all different. So not everyone has a life review. Sorry. Not everyone has a life review. Not everyone sees deceased relatives. Not everyone goes through a tunnel, and etc. But he had his life review, and he was working for an American organization that went to other countries to kill off adversaries. So people the US government didn't really like. I don't know. He didn't mention which organization that is, but maybe we can think of it ourselves. But he said it killed many people. And at one point in time, he blew up a whole hotel with 50 inhabitants in it just to take out one person. So during his near-death experience, he had his life review and he saw all his kills. But he said, literally, he said, I experienced all my kills from both sides. I felt what I did to another, but I felt also the other side. And he said, what the relatives and like the wives and the children of these victims felt, losing their father, losing their spouse. He said that was really hell. That was so difficult to go through. And interestingly, he's after his near-death experience, he stopped doing that. He went into working for a hospice as something else.
Mm. Wow, yeah, his story is really interesting because like what you were saying about the interconnectedness and stuff, it does just make you understand that we make people feel things, but we are just as likely to be able to feel that way too. And it does
Yes.
really make you consider the way you treat people, and you know, and in this world that's like so divided, um, I guess the opposite to someone who's maybe in touch with that interconnected side of us is probably quite egotistical, quite a strong sense of self, quite loving and selfish and inconsiderate of others. Do you think that, like, in the world we live in today, with things like social media and this big push on individualism and that sort of thing, do you think that brings us further away from the understanding that we're interconnected?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I definitely think so. The thing with social media is that it's so easy to demean others and to lie about things. I mean, AI makes it so easy to give wrong information or um, lies. It's all over the place. Every time I look at videos on my social media, every time I wonder if it's real. And I think this is because people don't feel the consequence of what they do. Um, and they think they are separate from others. They think they can do something and walk away without any consequence. But that's not the case. That may be the case while you're here on earth and just living your life and maybe filling your pockets with money that belongs to others or stealing from others or whatever. but you will feel what that is to the others. A real firsthand, you will become the other. There is no separation on the other side. That is being said over and over. No separation. There's no separation. Even even with animals. Daniel Brinkley had an example also in his book about an animal. He was driving in a car with his uncle somewhere in the United States, and he saw a farmer mistreating a goat, I think it was, who was stuck in the fence, and the goat couldn't go anywhere and was just beaten by the farmer. Now, Daniel Brinkley was a very ballistic kind of person, so he stopped the car, jumped over the fence, and kicked the farmer away. But in doing that, he gave the goat a little time to release himself from the fence and run away. Now, in his life review, it sounds really outrageous, but this is what he wrote. He felt the, the relief from the goat when he was hitting and kicking the farmer. So the goat could just escape and run away. And there are other stories about animals that people feel their feelings as well. So it doesn't stop with humans.
Mm.
We're not separate from other human beings. We are not separate from animals and from nature. We are part of it. We are part of one big thing. That's what I understand.
There's a great book actually that I read, and you may have read it. It's called Ishmael by Daniel Quinn.
No, sorry.
I'll send you the link for it after this. I think you'd really enjoy
Yeah,
it. And
please.
it it's how do I explain it briefly? It's a book that describes two types of humans, right? And kind of refers to the takers and the leavers, right? One society is like the Western world. You know, we think that we are the pinnacle of evolution, or that we have the right to own everything around us, and we are on top of everything. And then there's the other type of society, which is kind of like tribes that still exist today, where instead of thinking they own everything, they're just a part of everything. They're a part of nature.
Yes.
Um, it's a really interesting book, and I'd highly recommend checking it out. Um, I'll put it up on the screen for the podcast as well so people listening
Yeah,
can check
like
it
the
out.
Indians. The Indians had the feeling that they were part of nature and they had to look after nature because they also lived of nature. And then the Europeans came
Mm,
and just kicked everyone out. They killed all the bisons,
mm.
all their livestock and whatever. Yeah.
Same in South America too, with the Mayans and the
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's happened everywhere. Australia with the Australian Aborigines, and yeah, it's crazy. But how long do these near death experiences typically last?
Oh, it's difficult to pinpoint that. It's just very brief. But let me tell you that the extent or the length of a near-death experience itself has nothing to do with how long it was on Earth. It's not the same. So sometimes people just had a few seconds or minutes that they were out. But when they talk about their near-death experience, it's like days and months or so. It's a long stretch of time, because on the other side there's no time and everything. They cannot say this went first and then that happened and that happened. It's kind of a blur, but it's a consistent
Mm,
story.
mm,
And sometimes people have been out for half an hour. I read a few times, or maybe even longer, and that's quite long. If you don't have any blood flow to your brain, it's very quickly the end of it.
mm,
But then, even in those cases, could be just a very brief NDE while they were out for much longer. So it's difficult to say. So it could be very short that you're out, or long, and long can't be like days. It's an hour would be quite long already. And but the story they sometimes have can be very long, very extensive. It's interesting. There's no time on the other side.
Yeah, there's I know things like psychedelics and stuff isn't really your field of research. And you
No.
know what? I'd love to in future maybe see if I can have you on the podcast again, and maybe see if I can get someone who's researched into the effects of psychedelics, and see what you two can, you know, can collaborate on with ideas. But there's a there's a fascinating story, and this is psychedelics, on a guy who had this psychedelic called salvia, and he had a lot of it. And within the space of 10, 15 minutes or so that he was having a psychedelic trip, he reports having lived another life for about 3 to 4 months. Um, having had a new job, friends, family, like a whole new life. Um, and when you speak of these near-death experiences, I think that kind of sounds quite similar. This distortion of time, you know, within a matter of 15 minutes, it seems like something, and no matter, I don't know, short or long, has occurred within it. Have you heard any stories like this? And when you hear a story like that, what does it make you think?
I know I haven't heard anyone who had a different kind of life, but I have heard people saying that they had like months in a row or even years they were on the other side. And I just listen to these accounts because I'm a scientist. I take into account all the accounts that I cross. But for me, it's difficult to process this, to think of that you were out like half a minute or a minute, and that you have the feeling that you were out there on the other side for months. What did you do all those months? Of course, there's no food, so you don't need any food, and so that's how do you define a
Mm,
day there on the other side? I don't know.
mm.
It's for me, it's mind-boggling, but I just have to report what I hear. And what I sometimes hear, it doesn't happen that often, is that people sometimes have very long time on the other side.
What's the most intriguing near death experience story that you've been told?
Oh, there are several. The ones that talk about oneness, they are very interesting. The ones about um, a life review are very interesting. And there's one story of a little girl, Christina, who was abducted. Unfortunately, these things happen. So not every NDE is in a kind of a peaceful way. In this case, they tried to drown her. Fortunately, the father heard her scream and came to her rescue, but she had her near-death experience anyway. And then she said, I went through a tunnel, and at the end of the tunnel, there was an elderly guy, an elderly man, and it couldn't have been anyone else than my heavenly father. I just quote her words. And the heavenly father said to her, you have to go back. You cannot stay here. You cannot enter. It's not your time. But life is easy, and it's only four ingredients. And he gave the four ingredients to her, and those are love, be loved, just be, and experience life. Love, be loved, just be, experience life. And I thought that was sounded so simple,
Mm,
but in itself, the first two are you have to do something for it. It's an action, love and be loved. Let other people love you too. Sometimes that's difficult, but just be and experience life. Those are things that we can do just by sitting on a chair and doing nothing the whole day through. But it's nicer to do something. It's nicer to love and be loved and do things like that. It doesn't have to be in a sexual way or in a partnership way. It can be just friends
mm.
or neighbors or you in a club or so. It can be anything.
For someone who's maybe they're listening right now and they're really struggling to grasp this whole idea of having an experience when or as you're dying or during another time. And for the person who's struggling to understand that, what would you say to that person to maybe help them get on their way to understanding it?
Well, I would say understand or maybe read books where there's critical observations in it. So it gives you some circumstantial evidence that these stories are not just fairy tale stories. For
Hmm.
me, as a scientist, that was important
Mm.
to really understand that there is science behind this, although it's difficult to really research these things, but there is some scientific research being done on this in this area that gives some circumstantial evidence that it's real. For me, that was important as a scientist. And otherwise, I know there are skeptics that go great length in order to just refute these stories, and they will go with anything that they can find to just put it aside. And for me, that's fine. I don't mind. They lose something because I think if people would really understand what near-death experiences are, it could be valuable for a better life, both for yourself, but also for society as a whole.
Why? Why do you think that?
Because if you look at life reviews, you know that you are not separate from others. What you do to others, you do actually to yourself or to the source or to the big one, oneness. So that's what we spoke about before. If you really feel that you are part of others or that you're interconnected with others, you'll be nicer to them. You'll
Mm.
try to be nicer to them.
Are
And
there
then I think the world would be a better place.
are there any near death experience stories that contradict the ones that you've researched yourself?
In what sense?
Anything that's different? The common things you said you've seen are like life reviews or experiencing from other people's perspectives, maybe a warp of time and space where you
Hmm.
go into another room, etc. Are there any other unique, maybe anomaly near death experiences that make you think different?
Well, as I said before, not one NDE is the same as another. They are all different. So every time I hear one or I come across one, there are new elements in it, or there are old elements in it in a similar way. Like unconditional love is most of the time mentioned. Not wanting to come back is another one. The interconnection is oftentimes mentioned, but sometimes there's a reference to um, reincarnation. Um, that is something that I do not really understand, because I think if there's one source and we come from it and we go back to it, why would that? Why would there be reincarnation? It doesn't. For me, it's something that is mind-boggling
Mm.
because um, in this perspective, the source leads all the lives. So why would I, as Bob, when I die, go as this entity or this spirit go into another body? Uh,
Mm.
because Bob is not there. Bob is nothing. It's a role that I play on Earth. It's being based on my genes as a male person and a lot of other things in my genes and in my upbringing. That's the uniqueness that I have. But when I die, there will nothing be the same as that. It's gone, and I will be going back to the source,
Mm. Mm.
flowing back to the source. I will be diluted.
In this life review, Is it like watching your life back as if it's a movie?
Um, Not as a movie, not per se. Some people do see it as a movie, but some people see it as moments in time or images or feelings. It also this differs.
Mm,
It's not something that. And coming back to what I just said about reincarnation, I just also want your listeners to understand that I don't say that I know it all. It's not that I um, know that there is no reincarnation or so. That's not the case. It is more that I'm thinking about that and I leave it open for whatever it is. I don't think that anyone really can understand what is happening on the other side.
hmm
Um, so, and I always say that if someone does say that they know exactly how it works on the other side, you have to run away very quickly. Turn on your heels and run away quickly because it's not possible. The only thing that we know is the what comes from these stories the NDEs have, and that's you have to go into the quotes, and that's interesting. It's
mm.
a lot of stuff there.
I suppose it's like being in space and trying to see what's in a black hole, right? You can only circle around the event horizon to maybe get a glimpse, but once
Yeah,
you're in it, you can't return with the knowledge of
no,
what's inside.
you'll be
And
pulled into it, and you will be destroyed, I think.
yeah, well, I guess it's kind of like dying.
Yeah.
And these stories are obviously of people who haven't died, but they've had an experience of what maybe happens as you pass through the portal of life to death. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
what happened with some of these people after they had their near death experience? What was some changes that they experienced?
Well, having had a near-death experience is very difficult for those people. It's not something that you. It's not going to the theater and coming back home and going about your life again. It's a life changer. People change. They become less interested in money and power. For one of the things that has been uh, scientifically established, they become uh, all of them, almost 100% hit, they become not afraid of death anymore.
Mm,
They lose their fear of death because they know they have seen that there's an other side. And your consciousness continues. Your body is dead and it will uh, decay, but your consciousness will continue going.
mm.
Um,
Do you
so,
think do you think
yeah.
having a fear of death, not having a fear of death, is a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, I think I know that fear of death can be limiting people getting their life living their life to the fullest.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I think that's and other things that happen with people that have had an NDE is that they become more um, intuitive, sometimes even mediumistic. They feel what happens in the future. They a very strange effect is that they have seemingly have an effect on electricity. Computers stop working. Sometimes watches is electric watches stop working uh, when they put it on, and when they put it off again, when they release it from their wrist, it starts again.
what do
Things
you
like
think
that.
that
It's
is?
strange. I don't know. It is something that many NDErs say. Yeah.
So like they've had a near death experience and then they return to reality, and what, they just touch their laptop and it just shuts off?
No, when they come close to it, not always, but occasionally it would happen. Some people have it more than others, and many people don't have it at all. So I always joke that I hope I will be in an airplane without people that have had a near-death experience. But the chance of being in an airplane with someone who had something like that is big because it's 5% of the population.
What about some of the more distressing NDEs
Oh
that you
yeah.
the vertical observations and those sort of things? What about some of those?
Well, the distressing NDEs, there are is a subset that is distressing. They have distressing elements in it. Some people don't like the speed going through the tunnel. Some people don't like hanging in this black velvety environment because nothing happens there, and they have the feeling that they're alone. And some people, very small minority, have real hellish kind of experiences. And it was not still not known what triggers that, but we know now for sure that we cannot say that good people, good between these things, have only blissful NDEs, and bad people again have only distressing NDEs. Because, as I said before, Damien Brinkley, as an example, he went around killing a lot of people. He was in countless fights. He was mean to people when he was young. He had a troubled life, so to speak. He had a blissful NDE. Apart from his life review, because he said that was really terrible, but the other part of his NDE was blissful. There was abundance of unconditional love for him, soothing feeling, or whatever. There are, on the other side, there are also very common people, and some of them write a book, and I've accounted one of those, or well, many of them, but one that wrote a book about her life, and she has had a very common life, yet she had a hellish experience. Now, the theory is that these kind of experiences pop up from our collective conscious, but also from our individual conscious. So in her case, she had fear of hell and purgatory because of her upbringing, also in the Roman Catholic Church. But she was also fearful of attracting AIDS. She was raped several times in her life, and it was an horrendous event for her. She had these kind of experiences in her near-death experience. So she sort of thinks that this is where it comes from. And our other example that I came across is a woman who had a fearful um, or distressing NDE, and in it she saw that children were being abused. She was abused herself during her life, and then in her NDE she came across children being abused, and she said, "I must have wound up in children's hell." That's really her quote. And then later, when she comes back again and she goes into therapy, she suddenly realized, or she gets this information that the two people that she saw in her NDE being abused were her abusers,
Mm.
was the life of those abusers in her own life. So she could process it all. So it has to do with what you create yourself. And I must say, for your listeners, not to give them this terrible idea that there is a hell that will last forever. That's not the case. So I really believe that it's because of your own um, personal conscious, what happened in your life that could pop up. But there are also near-death experiencers that explicitly hear that there is no hell and purgatory. So they have their near-death experience, and in their near-death experience, they hear everyone goes home. Everyone comes in this wonderful environment. There is no hell and no purgatory. Don't be afraid of this. Uh, just be, just enjoy life. Try to enjoy life. And I say that last bit because it's, everyone, there are a lot of people that have difficult lives. Every life is important. Every life is important. Everything we do is important. Try to do nice things to others. Also, when you are in the deepest problems in your life,
Mm.
try to do nice things to others, and there is always help, and you are always loved beyond your wildest dreams. That is what I understand from NDEs.
Um, for someone who's maybe like in an environment where they're around loads of people who cheat and lie and they're not very good people, why should that person come to the conclusion that they should do good, besides the fact that people around them are doing bad?
Because another thing that I understand from NDEs is that we have a free will. So you can, if you understand your situation, if you understand that you're in an environment where there is lies, that people cheat, if you understand that, that's the first phase. You need to understand that. If you understand it, and you can try to change it, and if you try to change it, there will be help.
Mm.
There's always help, but it requires that you want to change, and that in order to change, in order to wanting to change, you need to understand that you are in a wrong kind of environment.
Mm.
But nevertheless, even if you stay there, you will not be judged. You will only feel what you did to others as if you are those others. That's not very nice, I think. But you will not be judged and you will not be punished. There is no hell, no purgatory.
I personally I love philosophy, and in particular I love Stoicism and the works of people like Marcus Aurelius, and
Yes.
um it's fantastic philosophy, I think, guiding philosophy for life. And one of the things that, yeah, it's from the Meditations. He says, Marcus Aurelius says, the best way to avenge thyself is not to be like the wrongdoer. And it's basically this understanding that, like, to react to someone's bad action towards you is to react, is to do what they did to you back to them. You become just as bad as them by doing the
Yes.
bad thing that they did to you.
Yeah.
Is that an understanding you think people come back with as well after an NDE?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Actually, when you were talking about that, I thought of the words of Jesus to turn your other cheek, because
Mm.
if you hit the other one, you become just as bad.
Mm.
But it's also, I think, stay close to your heart, because in your heart there is unconditional love too. We are part of this unconditional love, so there is unconditional love in everyone, also in the people we dislike most, maybe politicians. There is unconditional love in them as well. It's under a pile of junk. Maybe they are not able to express it. And also the people that harm you. Yeah, so better not to do the same thing, because you become them. You
Mm.
become the same kind of person. So you said it wonderful.
Mm. I think people who really struggle to treat people well are people who struggle with their own insecurities as a person. Things like envy and resentment and all of these bad things, I think, are what primarily lead people to do wrong, be true wrongdoers. Although, saying that, um, the works of, like, Socrates, I think Socrates said it. The there is no, like, no one is wholly wrong. People only wrong do because they were ignorant. They were unwillingly deprived of the truth. They didn't know. They thought what they were doing was, in some regards, the right thing to do. Whether that's, and I think this is exactly what you were saying earlier. People who are, maybe they were born and raised in a deprived environment, they think stealing the loaf of bread for the shop to feed their family is a good thing because their family can't starve. Now, stealing isn't a good thing, but in that circumstance, for them, there was some
Yes.
right in doing it. Um, and I
Yeah, but
think,
also maybe more horrible that if you if you were in an environment where rape is normal or incest is normal, you do it again to your own children or to the environment. So that is not very nice, but it comes from somewhere. It doesn't just pop up like something.
Hmm.
So every single action we do has some things before that led to this action, and it's and there is a we if you understand that that's the case, you can change it because there is free will. That's what I understand. There is free will. There is a possibility of change.
Mm. You touched on something that Jesus said. You said you were raised Roman Catholic. What similarities and what sort of things align from your perspective now on spirituality in life and that sort of thing after having researched NDEs? What align what of that aligns with Christianity and traditional religious beliefs?
I did a study of the five main religions, and in order to see what the parallels were with NDEs and where they deviate. And the thing that I loved most of Christianity is what Jesus once said. He was asked by the Pharisees, what is the most important commandment? And Jesus says, the most important commandment is to love God with all your heart. And the second commandment, equal to the first one, is to love your neighbor like you love yourself. And that's interesting because he puts on the same footing God, your neighbor, and yourself.
Mm,
And that's interesting because what I understand is that we are all one. So that's what he says here. Love everyone. Love God, love your neighbor, but also yourself, because we are all one. He doesn't say that last little bit, but it's in between the lines. And I
yeah.
love that. I loved
Mm.
it really. And in any of the other religions, there are wonderful things. And there it's, yeah.
What do you think the experiences of people who have had NDEs? What religion do you think it's most alike? The things they come back with. What religion is it most alike?
There is an NDEer who had a distressing NDE, and he asks for Jesus during this process. Is a longer story, but suddenly Jesus pops up, and at this point I have to tell that also in other religions, other NDEs, main characters of other religions have been spotted. So not only Jesus, but also Muhammad, Krishna, and many others. But in this case, Jesus came along. And then this NDEer, his name is Howard Storm, he wrote a book about this. He asked Jesus, what is the best religion? And then the answer Jesus gave is the best religion is the religion that brings you closest to God. So it could be anyone.
Mm, interesting.
The
Interesting.
only thing is, what matters is coming close to God. And I don't like that word because it's religious connotated. I rather mention source
Hmm.
as a word of God.
Do you think that God, source, universe, higher power, they're all the same thing? What people are referring to when they speak of that? Do you think they're referring to the same thing?
Yes. I think that Allah and God and Yahweh and Krishna and or Atman actually are all the same. It's there is only one. So any story that refers to God refers to the one thing. But God in Christianity is most of the time represented by an elderly guy on a cloud with a long beard, and that's not the case. That's
Mm,
ridiculous, because then God will be descendant from the apes as well. That's really outrageous.
mm.
Stop doing it. It says so in the first commandment. Don't make an image of God,
I think
because you will always fail.
Yeah, that's true. And I think there's so many things, and I think this is an extension of the way the world is today with like science, and the way that like empiricism and that sort of thing has gone nowadays is too it's become very evidence based. People want proof and evidence of certain things,
Yeah.
whereas there are just some things which we cannot prove. You know.
Well, I think it's still righteous to say that we need proof, and that's what science tries to do. And there's some research going on to get closer to what an NDE actually is, or where it comes from. I think we need some more time.
Mm.
And also physics. In physics, I want to remind you of the fact that in quantum mechanics, it's also the case that reality is based on the observer. I don't know the details, but this is one of the main things from quantum mechanics, and also from other research, and also the relativity in Einstein's theory. So everything is relative.
Mm. Yeah, I hear that it's E equals MC squared, right?
Yeah, that's his. It basically boils down to that.
Where everything that it seems to boil down to that, doesn't it? Literally everything you can bring it down to. I don't really get the
I don't
logic of
know.
it though.
I don't
Af-
know.
After
I'm not
years
a
of
physicist.
after years of studying NDEs and not having had one yourself, are you afraid of death?
No,
Why?
because I made it. Uh, it's innate in me, the idea of NDEs. I've spoken to so many people that have had an NDE, and you can see it as a benign virus that is in me now. You don't have to have had an NDE yourself in order to have the after effects, or the idea that this is what it is, as I explained in the last more than an hour.
Mm.
So I'm not afraid of death. I don't like the idea of certain deaths. So the way, but it seems to go very quick. One person said, "Go so quick, it's your body or your spirit is out of your body as a toast pops out of a toaster."
Mm.
So
There's after listening to all of this today, people will probably draw upon two conclusions. Maybe they've struggled to understand, and it is quite incomprehensible. Um,
yes, I understand.
Something after what we've experienced, like this life. How can we even comprehend what happens after it? How do we even comprehend potentially nothing? How do we comprehend something else? But I think an understanding and almost like a belief in this is definitely good for us. Whether you believe it or not, it's kind of like that whole. I think it's I forgot the name of it. It's something. I'll have to look it up. But it's like a four-way matrix grid. It's kind of like a belief in God. Don't believe in God, believe in God. God exists, God doesn't exist. And it's like no matter what, you're always better off for just believing in God anyway, because it guides you in life. You feel better, you feel more connected. And if God ends up not being a real thing, well, you've benefited from it anyway. And I think from this as well, having the belief that, or the understanding that you will potentially have to experience from the perspective of others the impact that you had on them. If you hold that in your mind, very quickly you'll sort your act out and start treating people better.
I think you said it wonderful.
Mm. And yeah, and that's one thing that I've taken from speaking with you to today, personally.
Wow. Thank you for telling me that. That's wonderful. I hope I came across to some of your listeners too. Would be wonderful.
After all the things you've studied and the stories of people having NDEs that you've read and properly looked into, what do you think death is trying to teach us about life?
That the consciousness continues.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's the basic thing.
Bob, it's been wonderful speaking to you. Where can we find your work? Where can we find your book?
Well, I have a website. It's www.bobcopers, COPPES.com. And my book is on Amazon, and it's the name is Impressions of Near-Death Experiences, with more than quotes from more than 100 NDEs, but it's on Amazon.
Amazing. Yeah, I'll put the links on the screen and down in the description
Please.
for anyone who wants to check out, read some of Bob's material and look into his website. Bob, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Wonderful being with you too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.